Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon for top reasons why change management fails and how failure to plan is a plan to fail. Today with me this afternoon is Mark Eldridge.
Yeah,
Mark,
it's clear.
would you mind maybe sharing with us some of your current goings on with Algonquin and maybe some of your certifications?
Um, yeah, of course, you've all got the picture. You've all got the picture in front of you, and this isn't meant to be in inordinate pride or anything else, but meant to give you some sense of comfort that I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. So I've been a certified change management practitioner and professional with APMG now since 2015. I teach their course about 5 times a year here in Ottawa and occasionally elsewhere when the demand is high. And I also teach a shorter version of the course under the rubric of certified local change agents. And as we get a little bit further through the deck, you'll begin to understand the importance of the change agent and the overall change management process. I've also taken the training and been certified with the other principal deliverer of change management training, certainly across Canada, and that's with ProSci. So I think you'll all recognize both the ProSci name and the APMG name. So, professionally, that's where I come to it from, obviously from an experiential point of view, fairly significant background in actually as a practitioner.
Very good. So you've got a no fairy dust disclaimer here. Maybe you want to throw that out there.
Yes. The alternative view of this is projects don't happen by Gantt charts, which everybody I think will again recognize as a one of those standardized rubrics. We all need to be very attentive to the business of change, the management of the business of change, and I'm sorry to disappoint anybody who thought that in an hour there was going to be the grand recipe book, which following from page 1 to page N would solve all of your change management problems. There's no substitute both for having the right process in place, supported by the right people with the right background and training. But I think experience is our best teacher as it works through change. That which we learned worked or didn't work in the last one is the right way to sort of process and move forward.
Very good. So yeah, please help us walk through
Okay.
here.
So I think classically, and what I should say is my slides here are some extracted from the actual training package that I do use, and then some additional slides of my own. But I think one of the things that's important to realize is that a change project, something which improves your business, something which brings some business benefit in terms of market share or improvement in efficiency or effectiveness within the business operations, is a project activity. You bring in some new IT enablers, you bring in some new processes, you move to better facility, you bring in some new operational processes, whatever they may be. That's the change. The change are the actual events. But if I can make a distinction between the change, the actual events, the project scheduled activities, and the transition. And when we talk about change management and change resistance, what we're fundamentally talking about is the natural human response to those things which arrive in their lives as disruptions that they may or may not understand or may not appreciate. So while I'll talk about change management and the challenge of change, what we're really talking about is helping people jump from one side, a status quo, to a Valhalla of the future, being reasonably certain that they'll be supported and coached and sort of made whole by the process. So this transition piece, this natural human psychological process of letting go with what we're comfortable with today and being ready then to accept what is coming in the future. And I think probably everybody is familiar with this, whether you're looking at it from an IT point of view or most points of view. You generally accepted numbers are that 70% of projects fail to deliver fully, whether on budget, whether on time, or whether in terms of the scope that was intended. And it is equally, I think, accepted, although perhaps not known to everybody, that the biggest single contribution to that unlikely success, or that likelihood of failure, comes from employee resistance and management inattention. Of course, the two of those are strongly coupled together, and you'll see the theme as we go through the next minutes of this idea that much of the challenge lies with management or leadership not taking full control of the situation, giving people a reason not to resist, and actually leading through example and otherwise through the process of change. I'll leave a pause there if anybody wants to challenge that or ask a question.
Well, Mark, culture seems to play a huge role in this discussion. So, there's that old saying, culture eats change for breakfast, or strategy for breakfast. But, how does clarity of vision and how does management's role play to form the strategy and the culture of a business, and particularly the culture of a project?
Well, if we think about the earlier slide, I talk about the transition, that psychological leap of faith from the status quo where people are comfortable, and that move to the better future that senior management recognizes will be there, but perhaps not everybody does. We must always take into account not only the individual concerns. Will I be able to learn this new process? Will I be able to manage this new enabler? Will I be able to find my way in this new place? We also have to take into account the extremely important fact of organizational culture, because some of our change projects, of course, are going to be disruptive of the organizational culture. We can all think back to pick one, like Xerox going out of the photocopier business because, well, we own the patent in photocopiers. We don't have to worry about somebody else eating our lunch. The organizational culture of an IBM focused on business machinery that couldn't understand the need for a desktop computing revolution. So culture has a huge part, and if we are going to disrupt not only people's working lives, but also the cultural anchors, the cultural foundations of the organization, leadership has to be front and center, absolutely convinced in this, and with the certainty of the benefit that they're proposing that this change will bring, and to provide that as a motivating, in fact, perhaps inspirational vision statement to the workforce, so that they not only believe in the future, but believe that they can get there as an organization.
That's great points. So they need to get out in front and lead, which is really, nothing really happens in an organization without management and leadership and expectations.
I think I'm always a little bit concerned about sort of saying, okay, leadership has to be out in front, and because I'm not delusional either. I realize that the C-suite in any organization has far more things to occupy them and call for their attention in the course of a given day, week, month. But there needs to be the continuous belief amongst those who are about to go through the change that the leadership has a grip, knows where it's going, knows that we can all get there safely, that nobody gets lost along the way, and that when the need arises, that the leadership will be there to provide the resource, and provide the motivation, provide the inspirational vision and leadership by example that's required. I've worked with organizations where they claim to be learning organizations, and every time that there's the hint of a budget cut, the first thing that gets hacked is the budget for training and the budget for going to courses and seminars. So we need to be careful that we're saying the right things and doing the right things. Having said that, there's no way that in any company over a couple of dozen, where the CEO, the president, or somebody else is going to be at that level, is going to be running the change. There is a need for, the sort of the professional grounded people to actually carry out the mechanics of the day-to-day change. But the idea that, leadership understands where the people are, accepts that the natural human response to a disruption in their lives is resistance, that they are empathetic to that and engage with those individuals, not only providing a vision, but listening to the feedback of their employees who understand and appreciate their jobs at that level, maybe even can offer some advice on better ways to move forward. But also not only the motivation to the people, but the leverage to the organization if there's a cultural change involved as well.
Very good.
Hi, it's Renata. Can I say something or should I wait to the end? Just in case it's answered.
Renata, it's right here. If there's a question of clarification so that I don't shoot past something and forget what I said, maybe the best thing is to just interrupt me and we'll clear it up right now.
It wasn't a question, it was just a comment. I'm in finance, and my experience in working on different success and other projects is that management leadership is key. Management needs to understand the implications of what they're doing. I think if there's employee resistance, it's because management has not provided a clear explanation of what's happening with this project. I think by definition, our projects cause cultural disruption. There's no two ways about that. But if management doesn't understand the implications of what that means for their employees, that will make a phenomenal difference in our projects, our work, the actually result of the project, every step of the way. That's all I wanted to say.
No, thank you, Renata, for that insight. And I'm sure the prospective clients on the call today can take that away, as well as existing customers, as this is kind of aimed at making sure that we're sharing that knowledge. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Renata. I was going to say we can just wrap it right now if everyone's happy with what Renata has just said.
and we can definitely have an open mic at the end for Q&A for sure, because I think there's always some great dialogue here. So thank you. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I think that, leadership is one of those curious things. It's very hard to define what makes good leadership, but it's pretty obvious what makes bad leadership. And I think as in the context of change management, it's very difficult to say what makes for good change management. I think empathy and empowerment are two words that are very often overused or ill-used, but I think they're crucially important as we go through the process of the human transition and the cultural change that goes along with manifesting any sort of a disruptive change inside of an organization. But the one thing that is for sure, and I think the one thing that we can point to with some objective evidence, is that absent clarity on the intended outcome, the change is headed in any one of a number of directions, probably not the right one. The idea of fact-based preparation and understanding with some degree of clarity that an organization is ready for this change and that the change itself is appropriate to the organization, that there is some understanding on that basis where the likely sources of resistance are, and therefore the inverse of that, what's the likelihood of achievability. Planning, to reiterate the title of the discussion, failure to plan is very definitely leading you in the direction of a likely failure. I think in most changes that I have experienced, both small and large, somewhere in the order of 60 to 75% of the future potential for resistance can be anticipated at the planning phase and dealt with there. I make the point about, I think, adaptive methodology. You've got to have a methodology that works for you. I don't think a change methodology in a box is the right solution for your organization. You have to figure out what it is that works for your organization, how you engage with people, how you empower people, how you listen with empathy to their concerns, and how you move forward on that basis. But I don't think that any of us can manage a change after change after change with a static methodology. It has to evolve. It has to be based on lessons learned and continuous improvement. I think skilled staff and an investment in their knowledge base, their understanding and their ability, their insights into some of the more sort of technical details of how do we work the motivation aspect and the leverage aspect of it will go a long way as well. But I see that more as an investment in today's business world. Nothing happens without a change, right? Other than going out of business.
Those are great insights. Thank you.
So I often get asked, so, you know, what's the difference between change management and project management? And again, the project manager, if it's not, you know, a small enough project that the one individual can do both jobs, because these are quite honestly, in any decent size, you know, reasonably, you know, medium to large project, these are two full-time jobs. The project manager and the understanding of the, you know, scope, time, quality, budget aspects of the project manager, who seeks to then bring those enablers to support that business change, whatever they are, IT or process or you know, staffing or accommodations changes or whatever, but focused on that technical solution to give those enablers to bring that intended outcome. The change manager's job is all about the people. Their adoption process in the presence of their resistance, because their lives have been disrupted because they haven't been engaged suitably. You know, we have all of us invested no small amount of time and effort in hiring the right people and giving them the right skills and onboarding them and bringing them to an understanding of the culture of the organization. Why would we not, as we go through the process of change, put at least some decent amount of effort into getting them across that gap so that they make that individual transition, so that the marriage of the adoption by the people who no longer resist and have bought fully into the change comes in parallel with the delivery of the technical solution. You get the two of those things together, and people are working, you know, immediately in that new higher level, you know, delivering benefit.
Well, Mark, you've articulated this well. I guess one of the challenges we get into when we speak to our clients about doubling down with the same person being the project manager and the project lead is that it's so difficult to be both managing the day-to-day tasks of the project, the technical aspects, all of that, and truly listening to what's going on. Do you have any advice or tips to people who believe that they can get away with that? As small as an organization is, I believe the smaller the organization, perhaps maybe even the more change management support that they may require. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll offer a few thoughts, and apologies in advance for it being thoughts and nothing really definitive. This is the sort of question of how long is a piece of string. The project management is not an easy business, right? And it does, however, have the luxury of dealing with problems which don't talk back. You know, your schedule doesn't argue with you, your budget doesn't resist you. There are no aspects of scope which are going to, you know, start an argument over coffee. And it's easy, dare I say, slightly easier to make difficult decisions about trading off scope, time, budget. People are the problems that talk back. These are the people we care about, the people we sometimes have coffee with, perhaps we play darts in the pub in the evening. And it is a different basket of skill sets of communication and engagement and motivation which bring the individual transition in parallel with the technical solution. Now, we all know project managers who are empathetic and, you know, real people and great communicators. But I think if you view it in the sense that trade-offs have to be made by the project manager to deliver the enablers, and engagement and communication on an ongoing basis has to be delivered by the change manager to get transition, I think you can quite quickly see that not only are the skill sets not the same, but the volume of work is larger. than one person is going to be able to handle. And to John, to your point, in smaller companies, I think you're right. In a large company where we have, many people that we can bring to the larger change team as change agents who will operate on our behalf to facilitate and enable the change at the working level. In a smaller organization where you don't have the luxury of people, very often I would advise that there is merit in having somebody who looks to the change, the individual transition, the change management activities as a separate task from the project manager. Although if there are two of them, clearly you can see by my depiction of this, neither of the two of those is making a decision or moving forward or aware of things within the project activity that the other one is not. They go about joined at the hip, common understanding, common knowledge, commonality of thought, commonality of purpose.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. We deal with a lot of small to mid-size. We often find in the larger firms, resources abound. It's easy to create these assignments, but I've even had, or we as a company have had, presidents step up to be the project manager. And if I had to make that trade-off, I would suggest that they're probably a better change management person because they can dive into personnel and visionary issues. But to be a project manager and a change manager, first off, it's not recommended from the president's role. But second, we really need to separate, but not lose that alignment, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's a great synopsis of it, John. That's perfect.
Great, thank you.
So to my point, I guess, about the anchoring effects, not only of, people's familiarity and adherence to the status quo, but also the organizational anchoring effect of culture. It is almost without question, and it is in my experience never the case that the C-suite has the fullest possible understanding of the readiness of the organization to take on change. And there are clear fact-based analytical ways of determining this in some detail. But generally speaking, the leadership sees the future. That's their job, to be visionaries. It is their job to motivate people to join in that pursuit of that vision. This is not to suggest that anyone's wearing rose-colored glasses or being unwarrantedly enthusiastic, but it is often the case that a more detailed examination at a sort of a root cause level is warranted before we start, even if it's only for the purpose, as Renata has said, of warning people that things are coming and getting them engaged in that delivery so that they feel a part of it. I often say people don't resist change. People resist the feeling of being changed. Should I say over at the end? So traditionally, as I say, people fear this anxiety. People have this anxiety when you come to disrupt their lives. And this is why I use this graphic to amplify the fact that which you show as this fairly benign little rabbit hand shadow puppet, okay, is very quickly turned in the minds of people who, either through lack of knowledge or in fact malevolence, will willfully misunderstand what you're saying and turn what is otherwise a benign concept into something which is, this boogeyman that raises their fears and concerns. I've talked about the organizational culture effect. What I haven't spoken yet about conflicted middle managers. The middle managers in our organizations, and we all know this, they're the meat and potatoes of the organization. They translate strategy speak down to daily tactical speak for the people who are doing the work. They are the connection, the sinews and the connective tissue in the side of the organization. Given the chance to be a part of a change and also to mind their daily activities, you're asking somebody to take the position of the man who stands with one foot on the dock and one foot in the canoe and has to make a decision at some point. Yes, I know what my daily work is. I know what your expectation is of me, boss. However, you want me to get on board with this change as well, and therefore ends up a little bit conflicted. Over. So this is what I call these traditional loci, but as I say, very often it's a matter of people not being able to see fully where it is that they're going and what's in it for them, because at some level we are all just that selfish. They will feel that transition anxiety. How many changes have you done in the last year, in the last decade? And are they simply tired? And how many of those changes went well? And are they cynical? But to my point earlier, we've invested in these people. Why should we not view them as deserving now of support and coaching through that transition? And of course, at the end of it all, and perhaps if there's time towards the end, I'll tell a little anecdote, but it is very easy for people to slide back into the old ways of doing things if we take our eye, as leadership, if we take our eye off the ball too early before we have cemented the change.
You know, Mark, I guess I have a question on individual resistance, but can't we just tell people this is just happening and not to worry and trust us? Like, why do we have to motivate them all the way through? I don't get it.
Yes, we'll just shout at them and we'll give orders and say yes. I think the real challenge here, and you know, I don't want to say that people are fickle or you know, experts in misinterpretation. You know, these are people that, as I say, we've invested time and effort in. They are the experts in what they do, or we wouldn't have hired them to do those things. We are going to bring now a major disruption to their lives. We're going to teach them a new set of keystrokes because we're bringing a new enabler, a new, you know, enterprise system of whatever kind. Or we're moving them from one building downtown to the other corner of downtown where they're not familiar with the bus routes and all the rest of these things. And, you know, leadership can shout and stamp their feet and give orders. But at the end of the day, you know, people will misinterpret, they will misunderstand if they don't see what's in it for them, right? And they need to be given that, you know, sort of support and guidance. But the big thing here is, and I also teach a leadership course at Algonquin, so I'll slide over into that little bit for a moment. Leaders don't motivate people, right? People motivate themselves. Leadership puts in place organizational and procedural and other tools that make people like working there, enjoy doing what they're doing, and therefore find within the business environment those things which motivate them. They will work harder for you, they will work longer for you, they will do better for you if you provide them the organizational construct in which they can find the motivation. Shouting at them and telling them to get on with it is not the way to start a change, because it just causes people to bunker down and resist.
It's been my experience that sometimes the most trusted people in the organization are the very ones who perhaps have a different view of the change for various reasons. And I think there's a lot of fear, but I really, whether it be purposeful or not, or intentional or not, I should say, I find that some of these most trusted individuals are giving a message that may not be completely accurate, or is skewed by where some of their fears lie, perhaps in giving up some perceived controls. Is there a comment you would make about, you know, I don't know, I'd use the term almost getting snowed by a messaging that may be contrary to what the company's trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'll start by asking the simple question, what is a cynic? And a cynic is somebody with bright ideas who's been slapped down too many times, right? Somebody who has endured the last so many failures, somebody who has perhaps seen the good and the bad, and is simply feeling left out by not having been consulted. That individual's expertise, wherever she may have gained it, whatever, you know, experience she has in the background and so on, and then comes and says, well, this isn't going to work, or, you know, this is going to fail like the last time, and whatever. I mean, we need to treat those people with the respect that they deserve, that they are helping us to understand two important things. One is we have failed to engage them at a sufficient level that they can see what's in it for them, and they have been able to share back to us, right, the experience that they have had, which might actually help us improve the process of change and therefore speed the inevitable conclusion to the change and therefore make it better for everybody else. I think in many organizations, particularly smaller agile organizations where everybody, you know, is doing one or two jobs, the organization is one deep in many places. People who don't feel they've been respected and consulted as a change goes forward are often the people who will resist the most out of sheer frustration of not having been heard, not having been engaged.
And coincidentally, through that, they're also part of the most trusted, experienced. They usually have a following of people that really trust their experience in many other areas of the business. But if they're not on board, their leadership and the people downstream that look up to them will pretty much follow suit.
It can be very destructive. You know, these are the folks that Malcolm Gladwell calls the mavens, those who are the trendsetters. You know, the Instagram influencers of the workforce. People that, you know, as I say, they respect. You know, and again, I can offer an anecdote later or at another point. But having gone through an organization, a very large industrial organization, 2,500 tradespeople, you know, people who wear blue coveralls and safety boots and hard hats all day, we simply knew that bringing a dramatic change to the organization would simply not work if it came out of the air-conditioned floor where everybody wore a tie. We actually invested the money in sending some of our first-level supervisors away to be trained. We actually sent them out of country. They were away from the workplace for almost a month. It was a huge investment, not only in terms of the money, but also in terms of the activity that lost as they were out of the workforce. But the payoff was that they became quite literally proselytizers for the change that was going to be made. They became the new prophets within inside of the organization. We released a degree of creativity and oratorical skill in some of these people who, you know, quite unexpected to us, took the change that we knew had to be made it their own, owned it, and led the change on our behalf. It was quite dramatic. But we knew going in that had we not been able to bring those people on side, we would not have made the change, you know, in the way we did, with the speed we did, with the success we did. So it's a lived experience for me, John, what you've described.
So it's
Well,
really
Mark,
about, go ahead.
Sorry, Mark. John, I was just going to say too that, you know, involving the people in communication is so key in any, you know, communication is one of the simplest things that we can do to kind of involve the group and make sure that they feel that they're part of a team and that they're being heard, and, you know, making them somehow participate during the whole thing lets them take kind of ownership. And then that's like what you say, then they start to just automatically be the ones that are actually dictating it and talking about it and leading it. And that's what when you go through this kind of this whole transition, and it seems to just change.
Yeah, I think we're creating evangelists. We call them change agents in the project, but these are people that can take the naysayers and help them see the other side. I really see that as a value.
Yeah, and that two-way transaction with the change agents, people who bring the change and the concept of the change to the people they work with in the language they understand, with the what's in it for me that's meaningful, but also bring back to the center, to the change team and to the change leadership. Look, I don't think this is working here. These people have come up with a great idea. Why don't we build this into the change, and so on. So it's a, you know, I mean, change, the change is a transition thing. That means it's a people thing. It's a people thing. It's a leadership thing. If it's a leadership thing, it's a relationship thing. And if it's a relationship thing, it's a communications thing. So this is an interesting chart. Many of you will recognize this as Kubler-Ross's grief chart. The psychological or the internal response to people to change is pretty much the same sort of a curve. You'll see it starts at a point of morale and energy of performance of some measure. People go through an initial shock and denial place where oh my God, you know, how could they be doing this to us? Maybe if we work just a little bit harder, we'll produce just a little bit more, we'll be a little more efficient. they'll go away and take their change with them. So you see that little bit of an upturn in performance. But inevitably, if we are serious and we're fixed on this particular change, no, we're not going back, the old analogy about the burning platform and so on, we have to move forward lest we are consumed by the flame, then people go through this roller coaster of anger and self-blame and bargaining and depression and confusion. And our job, of course, as change managers, while everybody goes through this curve, is to obviously minimize the duration of it and minimize the depth of it. So making that red arrow as short as possible and making that time frame as short as possible as well. And we use all of these various different techniques about engagement with people and understanding and empathy and two-way communication and so on as we go through there to actually help them get past that. Because obviously what we don't want is a whole lot of the workforce depressed, confused, uncertain, resistant, and so on over the period while the project manager is trying to bring some new enabler, some new change activity along, and then they're not ready to pick up and grab. Obviously, if we've done the job right, we get out of this, the depression in the curve as quickly as possible. We're on to the problem-solving area of the curve and clearly heading for better performance than what we had when we started, because otherwise, why would we have done the change? But what's key here is it doesn't matter, by the way, whether people view the change as positive or negative. People who view the change as positive will come out of the curve faster, but everybody goes through this curve, regardless of whether they perceive the change as positive or negative. There is a disruption to their lives, no matter which way they view it, which is the interesting part of it. So it's not just about the people who are out and out resisting and fighting the change. Everybody goes through a bit of a high-speed wobble.
I think the highlight here for me is that companies, people are buying into a new way of doing things. And in our world, that might be ERP, which has a lot of moving parts. But they're buying into it because there is an expected outcome. And it seems to me that we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we're not dealing with this up front, because that expected outcome will not only take a longer time to appear, but it might actually be struggling to exceed the performance of the past. So we need to get to that point where that arrow at the end of this graph is people are accepting, but they're actually seeing a greater performance. And when we see this go very well, we hear clients, the very people in the organization that were resistors say, wow, that was tough, but that was really rewarding. And I can really see that I would never want to go back to where I was with, insert Excel spreadsheets and manual effort to the new systematized way of doing things. But it's hard to see that if they don't have leadership to help build that bridge and create that vision. And I think that's the thing inside that I see is that when you have the presence of that vision and support, that trough is lessened in terms of depth, and that possibly we come out of it faster.
Yeah, I have had too many experiences of the facepalm moment when somebody says, how did we ever do the business before this? What was the big deal about putting this in place? And you go, wait a second, you were part of that absolute resistance. I often invite people to use David Cooperrider's appreciative inquiry technique. And that is to stand in that place at the end of that arrow in that problem solving space and say, what is so great about where we are today? There's one source of ground truth. We don't do reconciliation. All the information is in one place, in one format. We can draw business intelligence from it without, sort of manipulation of data. We're certain where we're going. We're certain what we've got. Stand in that place and tell everybody how wonderful it is, as opposed to trying to stand in the shock and denial space with a whip telling them to get going, get going.
My observation to the curve is that our clients go through this during the design phase. The depth of that curve, the depth of that trough is right near the end of unleashing and launching some of these processes. And my concern is that if we don't support those people early, they're going to hit that trough regardless. But one of the techniques that I've seen actually be very effective is that when a client actually asks their staff to do a before and after view, to help reaffirm that what they're doing is on the right track. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing from a management perspective. They really need to listen. these people who are running their business for the last X number of years are now changing the way they are going to do business in the future. They may never have done that before, but they're well suited because they understand the today, but they're not as trusting to the future, and they really need that confidence that they're going to have the support to come through it. And it just it's just finding ways to get people to stand up and speak to the future and own it. Really important to help reduce that curve.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some organizations that work, with everybody like cogs in a machine, and you can just order it and make it go faster. I don't think most of us work in organizations like that in 2020, and in 2025 we sure won't. The engagement of people, their creativity, their willingness to believe, their willingness to buy into a management vision is very often associated with their engagement in the process. If you let them help define what it is. I mean, my own ERP experience, which, got everybody at the keyboard level online, was the promise that there would never be a quarterly, semi-annual, or annual reconciliation between databases ever again. That simple statement brought everybody on board because they saw in it for themselves. But it took a while for us to figure out what it was that was going to motivate them, because none of us worked at that level. We didn't see it in that way.
So Mark, what I'm hearing is if we don't have the why and what's in it for me early defined, once we're into that curve, it's going to be a lot more negotiating and one-on-ones to realign the fears and doubts.
Once people have made the step to not believe you or to resist, their own cognitive biases, their own confirmation biases will look for confirmation of I'm right, you're wrong, as you try to explain it away later. So yes, absolutely. The earlier you do it in the process, the less likely people are going to develop a resistance and are going to then, their confirmation bias will then be looking for the positive in it rather than the negative.
Great point.
I have a comment, if I may.
Yes, please.
So here's my observation. And I'm talking more about big companies where there is a bit more hierarchy of management and staff. So I was working with this company for a long time. Everyone was in the room when we started it, and slowly but surely, a lot of people dropped out because they didn't think that the level of details that we were going through actually suits their position, and they didn't think that, and their take was, I just need to understand it high level, and they dropped out. Unfortunately, those people that dropped out were actually in key management position. And after the project went live, it's then that they came back, those managers, and said, this is not working for us. So we were actually at the end of this, this graph here. So how do you ensure that, and by the way, some of those key management were not really identified by us right up front because we really didn't know the hierarchy completely. So how do you enforce actually having those key people and identify those key people right at the front?
I think, back to my very early comment about the fact-based preparation and so on. We need to have that proper stakeholder analysis. Who are all the people who are going to be affected by this project? It's not just because we're changing the finance system. It's not just the finance people. It's the operations people. It's the people who contract for services. It's the people who sell and market. Everybody is influenced by this. To what degree? We have to work out. So we build a stakeholder map, and we make sure that some of those people, when we plot them on our stakeholder map, who say, yeah, well, I'm not very interested in this, it doesn't bother. We look at where they are relative to their influence in the organization and say to ourselves, I may not allow this system or this situation to pertain. So you bring them in, you ask them questions, you engage them, you make them become a part of it. Now, I do not have the solution to the communications dilemma that says, if you engage people early without all of the information, they'll say, go away and tell me when you've got it all sorted out. And if you engage them late, once you do have all the information, they'll say, why didn't you come and engage me before you made all the decisions? I haven't figured out the answer to that dilemma yet. The only thing that I can say is, as a change manager, and those of us advising change managers, you have to be very almost bloody minded about it. Bring everybody to the meeting, make them sit, make them listen, and engage them, make them answer questions, make them feel like they're a part of the solution. And now I go all the way back to the front of the discussion and reiterate the importance of the senior leadership, who have to be made to understand the importance of bringing these, sort of middle and other managers into the discussion, and use the power of their position to make sure that those people attend. But I think, Elka, the biggest way, or the best way, is find some way to engage them in a back and forth discussion. This isn't here to tell you about how this is going to work and so on and so on. Let us understand a little bit better your business process. Let us understand the parts in the business process that cause you pain. Let us understand where it is that you think we might be able to enable things in a better way and integrate. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's great. And I think asking people just to give themselves to the process, much like an oil tanker, when it turns its engines off 8 hours before it reaches port, it glides in. We're not going to see the port for quite some time, but we're going to develop that future together. And I think that's the team building side of it.
John, I feel I've talked far too long.
You got time for just one more question?
Sure.
So if a business has embarked on a continuous improvement journey, is there any kind of formula or length of time to stabilize that you recommend or seen as successful before the end of the arrow becomes the start of the next arrow?
You know what? At some point later in this, because we're not going to get to them all before we time out here. Somewhere later in this, I would talk about an idea called change resilience. And, if we have an organization where there is trust and loyalty within it, where people believe in the senior management, they know what they're doing, they know where they're going, where we've had successful change projects in the past, where people themselves believe not only in themselves, but in the entirety of the organization to put in place change, dramatic change in some cases. If we have resilience inside of the organization and it's vested in the people, then I think you can bring change along more quickly. I don't think an organization which has failed the last 10 change attempts is an organization that you should bring change to rapidly. It's very, very difficult. They need to build the basis of trust. They need to build the basis of self-trust that we can do this and we can move forward from here. It becomes very, very difficult. And the bigger the organization, obviously, inherently, the more challenging this is. Although I wouldn't say that to Google. There's a big organization that can turn on a dime and changes a reality of their day to day. But I think it's vested in the organization, the speed with which you can bring it. Unless, of course, it's an existential change, right? There is a new regulation or regulatory framework, or somebody has just, has just eaten our lunch market share and so on. Maybe it's an existential thing. Everyone on board now, all hands to the pump, or we're going to go out of business. But I think in simple terms, building that resilience, the trust and the loyalty in the organization allows you to bring change more rapidly to people and more frequently, because they understand and believe that we're all in this together. It's sort of like the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all.
Thanks.
How do you want to do the rest of this, John?
I think we should just push through. I think we've got a little bit more time left, and if we go over, we're fine.
All right. Well,
good, valuable information.
Okay. Yeah. So I've spoken to this idea, and I am not a Peter Drucker disciple. I do not believe that flattening the organization, getting rid of middle management was a good idea, because we need these people inside of the organization to bring to reality the vision of the C-suite. But they face some challenges as they try to bring forward and support and enable the concept of change as it comes down from above. So there, I've identified 5 things here that, you know, push back on those managers who we need to be engaged in the process, lest they become this inert and highly absorbent blockage. There is a conflict in themselves, obviously, both the status quo and the future. Do I have a job? You know, do I lose control? How big is my organization, right? Their own peers may be pressuring them from other parts of management, and certainly they have to be supported against the skepticism of their employees. And this is where the change manager, again, brings support and talking points and answers to the FAQs to these managers so that they become, or they are less likely to become disengaged from the process. We talked about the organizational change resistance here. Look at this. Now, there's an organization called ProSci. I mentioned it earlier. They do training. They also they sell product. But the thing that I find most valuable in what they do is regular surveys of organizations worldwide in terms of change management capability and change management success. These are their numbers. Organizationally, people say the importance of culture, its effect on change. Look at this, you know, we're talking nearly 100% of people saying that, or 90% of people, it's somewhere important and very important. If we change the organization in such a way that it conflicts with the foundation stones of the organizational culture, we are dealing with not only the issue of the individual resistance, but the anchoring effect of the culture. I'll use an example. A colleague of mine as a consultant some years ago tried to convince Canada Post to buy into the internet service provider business. And they said, no, we deliver the mail. Completely missing the fact that email. So organizational culture was about mail carriers delivering envelopes with stamps on them to postbox on people's doors. They couldn't see beyond. So an organizational cultural impediment, you know, we would have had a very different Canada Post by now had they been able to see beyond their traditional cultural view of their job.
I think that would be true with Kodak and continuing their bet on traditional film when they owned the patent of the digital camera.
Exactly. So I think we've knocked many of these on the head. You know, leaders who, again, respect the people who work for and with them, the people who deliver value to the organization, will engage those people, will understand that they are humans and they have natural human reactions. They're not automatons, right? That vision, the ability for leadership to be present, to be obvious, to have a consistent, clear, repeatable, you know, message about the future and walk that particular talk. I make the point here about emotions as well as logic. Vision statements have a lot of important concepts in them. And when we talk about vision statements for change, okay, the idea of capturing people's, you know, heartstrings as well as their brains is very effective, because we know that once I have you engaged emotionally in the concept, then your brain will self-rationalize and you will come along on the journey. Coaching and mentoring is fundamental to all of this. Everyone arrives intact at the end point, at Valhalla, wherever it is that we're going with this change, except maybe somebody isn't coming along on the journey. And at some point we have to draw a line as well. And it's a simple matter of saying, Mark, you're a great guy and you've done well for this company, but you're not clearly coming on this journey. You know, if you can't buy into this, if you can't understand the vision, if you can't accept it and come with us, perhaps your opportunities lie elsewhere. So sometimes we have naysayers who, you know, as important as they may be to the organization up to this point, are become so poisonous that they can't be allowed to continue on that particular journey. And here we go. So leaders in the audience, there's your role. even moderately effective leadership takes you from the 30% of failure that I started with to a 55% failure a success rate, or even as high as 70. So completely reversing the industry trend of 70% of failures to 70% of successes through highly effective leadership. And of course, it's a communications business. Highly effective leaders are highly effective communicators. Yeah, I consult in the business of change management, and I advise everybody to find inside of their own organization their change management team. I think organic change management teams in most organizations are fundamental to the success of the organization. So it feels less like the change is being done to people, but it's being done with the people, if there are people from within inside of the organization. But it's important that you pick people that are capable, I call it the courage of their convictions. They're able to bring not only the willingness to deliver on the project, but the ability to avoid groupthink, right? This is a good idea, but it's going in the wrong direction, or it's in the wrong direction now, or something. To have that honest assessment, honest advice. And you need to find those people inside of the, and we all know who they are, right? There's a handful of people in the organization, we know exactly who they are, who are good with the delivery, but will also tell you when it's not right. We've talked about change agents. Change agents, the bigger the organization, the more dispersed the organization is, the more multifaceted the organization is, the more change agents you need. The change manager, the senior leadership cannot be everywhere all the time. They need people providing agency for them, the fingers and the hands, the ears and the eyes, out on the shop floor, out amongst the working folk, out at the client-facing aspects of the organization, right, where things are really happening, bringing the concept of the change and the what's in it for me down at the level where the people are doing the work, but more importantly, bringing back any of those innovations that they see, because I'm telling you, some of the people in your organization are going to get out ahead of you on this change, and they're going to find stuff, and they're going to say, hey, did you know we can do this, right? And those are the things that you want to have your change agents bringing back from the the work level to the change team, saying, they've discovered this, or they want more of this, and sometimes we can change that on the fly, because they're a trusted source of information, not only coming from the leadership to where the people are making the change, but also from where the people are making the change back up to the leadership. Crucially important people.
I think it's really important, because as passionate as some of the people are bringing forward new opportunities, it could really erode the core scope or foundation of the project and filter it down into all kinds of other things that haven't been agreed to yet, or might be actually found out to be in conflict of other decisions. So it gets complex.
It does. And when people say this to me, I said, okay, fine. Do you have a requirements traceability database? Right? Scope great ideas that came back up from the floor. We're not going to do that right now. We'll put that in phase 2, or we'll combine,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was a great idea. We don't ever dismiss the fact that, Mark, that's dumb. That's, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen on my watch. No, we're going to put these aside, and we'll look at phase 2, or we'll look at, sort of product improvement phase somewhere down the line. And that's why I can add value, because they won't always add value.
I think in the interest of engaging those who we may have bruised early on or in the past, and now we've overcome those challenges, we run the risk of repeating history if we don't suggest that these are of value, but maybe just not right now. Yeah. Call it the parking lot of great ideas,
Right. And the nice part about the kind of databases that we have available now, these relational things, we can show where your good idea came forward. It was combined with 3 other ones that were related, and in fact has resulted in this product improvement. Here's my discussion about the change resilience. Right. I think I already spoke to the how do we get the right environment? How do we get everybody sort of all working together, the real team aspect where everybody has gone beyond just the norming and storming and forming part, but we're actually performing above and beyond. That's the kind of an organization that's going to be resilient in the face of change. Sometimes we have to provide that, go back to the coaching and mentoring here of people. They need to know that we trust them, and they need to know that they can trust us, and therefore believe when we say we're going to do this, right, that we're going to actually do it. So be honest about the challenge. We've done the factual analysis. We've looked at our organizational readiness. We see where the opportunity is. We see where the resistance lies. Look, we can do this. We can do this together. Then you make them do it. And when you're done, you show them where they've done it. Back to, and I forget, I'm sorry who asked the question now, but this idea about how much change can we take on in an organization. This is really important, that at the end of the change, right, when we get out the big cartoon scissors and cut the ribbon, that we make it clear to everybody, this change is over, this change is done. We are finished now, and we are on to the next one. Because a lot of people carry in their heads the idea that there's so much change going on because nobody has identified for them that this project is finished. So we need to stop for a moment, look back and say, well done, everybody. This change is complete. Now we move on with the new tools or the new enablers we have to do this better thing. It's important that they know when change X is done before we start change Y. So people resist, organizations resist. Leadership from the top is crucially important. Obviously, it's not unique to my own personal bias of having come from the military. Any organization where change has failed and failed dramatically, it is mostly on the fire and forget aspect of leadership. I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is. Leadership by example from the top, people who are being the change that they want to see, people who are constant in their drive towards that end point, will provide the circumstances for motivated people to join with them and move forward. Somehow we've got to engage up and down through the organization and make that emotional case first, and then the backup with the rational case, because hearts and minds together are going to be much. And of course, at this point, I often use the rubric of emotion trumps reason, and I picked that verb for a reason. Okay, that's the guy who does the emotional call to people, who then self-rationalize afterwards. Whatever you might think of the man's politics, he's brilliant at making that emotional and rational case together. Leveraging the formal and informal structures inside of the organization. Most of us don't know how everything happens inside of the organization. You look down from the top at an organization, we see what the organigram tells us and how people relate in a hierarchical sense. But we often miss the fact that there are many, many other currents, many other cross-silo activities that are happening inside of an organization where information moves, sometimes where we don't see it in the official sense. And we need to leverage that informal structure as well. Assessing and adapting. From my military background, plan seldom outlasts first contact with the enemy, or plan seldom outlasts first contact with reality. We've planned for, we've anticipated, we've got ways of breaking down the resistance, ways of motivating people to believe in what we're doing, but sometimes things happen. We need to be prepared to adapt as it goes, as we go forward. And then lastly, lest we take our eye off the ball too soon, we do reach that tipping point. We do reach that upturn, that point, that arrow point in the curve of the Kubler-Ross's curve. But some people will slide back if we let them, and we need to be mindful of that and attentive to that. So here are the essential questions. This is the genesis, if you will, of the plan. Why do we have to make this change? And therefore, what's in it for me? Is it a simple existential thing? If we're all on board, we'll weather this storm and we'll be better when we're finished. If we don't, we're going to fail and we will be out of business and everyone loses their job. it's that kind of a level of discussion that has to go into those first three questions. Who's involved? This is the stakeholder map. I think back to who asked me the question. I'm just running up. Elka, you asked the question about managing the engagement of various different levels in the leadership. Who's involved? What's their level of involvement? You need to ask these people, are we ready to do this? You make that assessment. And again, there are some mathematical ways of making that happen. Hey, listen, can we even do this? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right structure? Do we have the right approach? Have we got some planning tools? Have we got some ways of motivating people, et cetera, et cetera? So that we get everybody arriving in attack, moving forward together. And then lastly, making it stick. There is obviously a theme of benefit-oriented project in this. Obviously, we're trying to get to a place. So we need to just make sure that it sticks once we get there. Yeah, strategy obviously speaks to the where we're going. The sponsorship speaks to the leader. Lacking a vision, the burning platform, burning the boats on the beach, whatever it may be. We're not going to be there. That obviously gives us a scope. We need the right people in the right places. The communications plan, again, change management is a special case of leadership, which means it's a people thing, which means it's all about communications. There has to be a risk plan. The risk plan includes on the change management side, obviously, the sources of resistance and how we're going to manage resistance. On the project side, obviously, the usual risk planning happens, and the two of those integrate. And obviously some team building that goes with it. So this, I think the next couple of slides really are more about okay, so now what do I do with this? Okay. Once we've gone from the planning piece of it, the previous slide, we never take our eye off the people. We're always reinforcing the situation so that they find the motivation to move forward because they understand what's in it for them. The change agents and the communications piece of this again, the adjustment, the ability to react to circumstances which we didn't plan for, which hopefully is in that sort of 20 to 25% bucket, as opposed to the 70%, and then moving forward and overcoming from there. And this is just to reinforce the fact that just because the project is finished, just because the enablers have been delivered, I'll tell you, if I will really shorten this. One of the finest leaders I know, one of the best communicators that I know, took her organization through a new CRM implementation, a client relations management tool. And at the end of the first quarter after the implementation, she herself was a brilliant communicator. They had done all the right change management stuff. She was on the verge of firing her best salesperson, who, when challenged, said, "Oh, were we supposed to be using the tool?" Now, that's a grotesque shortening of what is otherwise a very motivating story. But here was somebody whose leadership skill and communication skill is without peer. And even in that organization, having taken the eye off the ball too quickly, nearly allowed an employee to be let go because she'd fallen back into the old way of doing business. So it happens, and we just need to be mindful of that and to not let that happen. It's all about the motivation. So this is how we're going to sort of sustain the belief, sustain the resilience, the coaching and the mentoring that goes all the way through. The basis of that is being open and honest, of course. Adjust the systems to reward the behavior. If you're moving forward to self-directed work teams in an organization and the entirety of the rewards and recognition program is only for individual actions, you need to change that, because you're not going to get the behavior you want from teams if you're only able to reward individuals. And the last point, of course, is a truism I think all the time. At some point, people are not going to come along on this journey if they're too disruptive to the process. Yeah, unintended consequences. Well, just the point. This is the focus part for the risk evaluation that goes with the change management activity. We're bringing a change, okay? People are going to be off the shop floor. People are going to be out of the office. They're going to be training. They're going to go through a learning dip. They're going to go through the Kubler-Ross curve. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen to the people, to the organization. So, we need to get the bank manager on board. We need to know that we have that secure loan to cover us while we're in that productivity dip that follows the Kubler-Ross curve, and so on. Things are going to happen along the way. The power goes out, there's a snowstorm, there's COVID-19, whatever it happens to be. We just have the usual workarounds for that. And then, of course, the change management activities themselves. We've got subject matter experts, we've got change agents who are, working part of their day on behalf of the change. This is really just an awareness of the potential for downstream consequence. Again, if we're not looking at these things and being sure to focus the mitigation strategies around that. So it's taken a while, but here's where we've arrived. You've all got happy, engaged, competent people working hard, right? You bring a change which disrupts their lives and causes a natural human reaction, right? The best thing we can do if we engage the people, not only at the level of their hearts, but of their minds, coaching and mentoring the way through. With the two-way feedback, we're prepared to listen, we're prepared to hear, we're prepared to adapt to the degree that we are able to, right? And we will pay attention to this throughout so that we end with the same group of happy, contented, satisfied people working with an improved tool set in an improved situation and delivering more as a consequence.
Thank you, Mark. There's so much we could talk about: empowering employees, breaking down silos, engagement strategies, really the finer points. But what you've articulated today has been very powerful in trying to help everyone understand how change needs to be owned. And, the whole idea that change management is today where project management was 15 years ago, and really how that case for change and the management support of it is so critical to making sure that people can understand where we're going and getting them into a plan and making sure that we don't backslide through that journey. So I know we've gone a little over time here. I really appreciate those who've stuck around, and Mark especially. Are there any questions? Does anyone want to, ask a few open questions about scenarios? We'll take a few minutes to do that, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, I actually do. Other than the fact that I have plenty of questions, and that I'm the cynical in the group, and maybe the next time we meet again, I'd like to know how SIX is going to implement that.
Great questions. And part of the discussion is part of our change management methodology that we're rolling out with our clients. It's probably a good segue to the discussion point here. We tailor every customer's project with a change management element. So we actually do a change readiness assessment. And to that, we give a scorecard back to our clients for things to consider for the key factors within the change journey. So appreciate that's actually an interesting question, and it's one that needs to be answered one-on-one with clients. But ultimately, we do have we've invested heavily in a tool set, and the tool set needs to be used. And when we have clients that use it and engage with it, together with our add-on services to support it, we have very happy, successful customer outcomes. We still reach those outcomes with our technical and capabilities, but we have to be honest that not every organization is willing to take the steps to take it that much further and emerge from these projects unscathed. Much like any commitment during tough times, projects like ERP and projects that are significant to the business will challenge every element of the organization. And as such, we need to be prepared to stand by what is our cultural commitments and our cultural, beliefs and belief systems that we want people to be a part of. So, our tool set in itself is not enough. We need a customer who's interested in fulfilling that role that they need to play. So, that would be my short answer, my long answer as well. But are there other questions, specifics that somebody might have come across that Mark might have run into, or do we wish to further follow up through email or calls?
I just have a general question for Mark, and the slide where the role leadership really plays, if it's weak leadership versus very strong leadership, and if a project manager or a consultant gets into a company and that leadership is weak, what steps could we take to help the customer take them the rest of the way?
Yeah, this is a difficult one, and I'm more than conscious of the fact that working from the middle of the organization, whether we're a consultant, whether we're working as a change manager, we're working from the middle of the organization. You can't create the leader. The leader is the leader that you've been dealt with. I think the way to do it is to spend some time coaching the leadership. My experience is that I've done this before. We've seen that. May I suggest to you that I would like to help you create the vision statement. If you would like, I will give you some examples. May I set up a round table with your senior managers? May I set up a town hall and give you the important talking points? We end up being coaches to the leadership, and inviting them to consider those things which we know are necessary, and you'd like to think they would also, but of course our leverage working with the leadership is weak, because there are certain things we can't say or ways we can't say them, and I understand that completely. Our job then becomes facilitators, not only to the change, but facilitators to the leadership. Put the right words in their mouth, give them the right talking points, give them the right leadership tools, and then point them in the direction you need them, and invite them to say those words and do those things.
It's a great point, Mark. And many times when challenged, I hear my clients say, we need you to be tough on us. We need you to give us that push. And interestingly enough, we often talk about ERP implementations as being open heart surgery while the patient's still awake. And sometimes that patient is the manager, and they're hearing one thing on one side from their most trusted employees, and we're asking them to lead in possibly a slightly different way than their comfort level. So they too are going through that change. So it creates an interesting dynamic, but it's, the customer is always right, is our going in position, but we also need to help guide and do what's right. So sometimes it puts us in a challenging juxtaposition. So it's an interesting perspective that both clients on the call and prospective clients on this call and consultants alike, we all find ourselves sometimes in. Great. I think in the essence of time, we are happy to engage anybody who would like to reach out to us and talk to us. If you're an existing client, you have an account executive, Service at Success Partners will expedite that process or reach out to them directly. If you're new to Success and you're interested in these types of services or that of specific ERP help, we are here to help. And regardless of what you're going through, if we don't have the answer, we know a lot of people that may. And so, Mark, really big thanks today for helping to enlighten us and help people understand what the journey is to change. Change can be so many different things, and there's so many opportunities that we can make every day to guide our businesses as leaders, as line level managers, mid-level managers, and as doers as well. And so, Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
John, thank you for the opportunity. I'm passionate about this, and I apologize for taking everybody over time. If there are questions that people want to flow through, John, I'd be more than happy to answer them by email. But thank you again for the opportunity, everyone.
Very good. Thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will record this session, and we look forward to engaging where anyone has questions. Anything we can help, we'll provide there's a few materials that we can actually provide, and we will make part of our follow-up email that might make your change a little bit smoother. So thanks once again for you, the audience. Appreciate your participation.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Thank you.